Today, Demi Lovato is known as one of the most recognizable voices in modern pop music, a global star with millions of records sold, sold-out world tours, and a career that began before most people even discover who they are. To the world, she represents strength, honesty, and survival. But how many people truly know that behind the fame, behind the confidence, and behind that powerful voice, Demi Lovato was quietly fighting a battle that nearly ended her life? In 2018, Demi was found unconscious in her own home, her heart close to stopping, her body shutting down as doctors raced against time. What's even more shocking is that this moment was not sudden, it was the result of years of pain, pressure, and trauma hidden behind success. Many people believe fame protects you, that success somehow makes suffering disappear. It doesn't. This is not a story about stardom. This is a motivational success story about survival, about how Demi Lovato came closer to death than anyone imagined, and lived long enough to tell the truth. On the morning of July 24, 2018, the world still believed Demi Lovato was doing fine. Just days earlier, she had released a song called Sober, a quiet, almost apologetic confession that she had relapsed after years of fighting addiction. Fans heard vulnerability in her voice, but most assumed it was part of a healing narrative, another honest chapter in a story that would eventually end well. That belief was dangerously wrong. Later that night, Demi Lovato was found unconscious in her own home. Her breathing was shallow, her heart rate critically low, her body already beginning to shut down. Paramedics would later explain that what saved her was not strength, not fame, not even resilience, but timing measured in minutes. Had help arrived any later, there would have been nothing left to save. What followed was even more devastating. Demi suffered multiple strokes. Her brain was injured. She temporarily lost her vision. Doctors warned her family that survival was uncertain, and that even if she lived, the damage could be permanent. There was no guarantee she would speak the same, sing the same, or even remember the life she had built. For days, she lay in a hospital bed surrounded by machines, while the world outside speculated, judged, and searched for explanations. Inside that room, there were no headlines, no fans, no image to protect. There was only silence, fear, and a body paying the price for years of unspoken pain. Later, Demi would say something deeply unsettling. She didn't remember wanting to die. But she also didn't remember wanting to live. And in that fragile space between life and death, everything she had been hiding finally demanded to be confronted. Long before the world knew her name, Demi Lovato learned how to endure. She was born into a family already marked by instability, financial pressure, emotional distance, and a father struggling with addiction and mental illness. Home was not a place of certainty or safety, it was unpredictable, and that uncertainty quietly shaped how she learned to survive. As a child, Demi was sensitive, creative, and emotionally perceptive, the kind of child who feels everything deeply but rarely knows how to explain it. At school, that sensitivity made her vulnerable. She was bullied relentlessly, mocked for her appearance, isolated, and made to feel like she did not belong. The words followed her home, and over time, they stopped sounding like insults from others and started sounding like truths inside her own mind. Her parents' divorce only deepened the sense of instability. Her father's absence, combined with his ongoing struggles, left a quiet but constant fear in her life, the kind of fear children rarely have language for, but carry every day. Demi learned early how to read the room, how to sense tension, how to stay small to avoid becoming a problem. She learned to be strong before she learned how to feel safe. By the time she reached her early teens, anxiety had already taken root. So had a dangerous belief that pain was something to be handled alone. Control became a coping mechanism. Food became something to restrict or manipulate. Silence became protection. And hurting herself became a way to release emotions she did not yet know how to name or process. Music entered her life not as ambition, but as refuge. Singing gave her something school never did, validation. On stage, she was not the girl being mocked or ignored, she was heard. Applause replaced bullying. Attention replaced loneliness. For the first time, Demi felt visible, not as a problem to be managed, but as someone who mattered. But beneath that sense of belonging, nothing had truly healed. The trauma was still there, unresolved and unspoken, simply pushed aside by performance and praise. Music did not erase the pain, it distracted from it. And when a child learns to survive through performance rather than healing, the wounds do not disappear, they wait. When opportunity arrived, it did not arrive gently. It arrived fast, loud, and overwhelming. And the same sensitivity that once made Demi vulnerable as a child would soon collide with a world that demanded perfection, discipline, and constant strength. Because when fame comes before healing, it does not save you. It carries everything you have never faced into a much brighter, much louder place. Demi Lovato's rise did not happen gradually, it happened all at once. At just 15 years old, she stepped into the Disney machine, a world carefully engineered around smiles, perfection, and the illusion of innocence. When Camp Rock was released, Demi became a household name overnight, and with that sudden recognition came expectations she was far too young to understand, let alone manage. The transition was overwhelming. One moment she was a teenager still carrying the scars of bullying and anxiety, the next she was a public figure expected to represent confidence, positivity, and flawless self-control. There was no space to be uncertain, no permission to be fragile. The message was subtle but constant: success was fragile, and it had to be protected at all costs. Every interview required enthusiasm. Every appearance demanded energy. Every photo captured an image that had to look effortless. Behind the scenes, her schedule became relentless: rehearsals, travel, promotions, and performances replacing any sense of a normal adolescence. Privacy disappeared, replaced by scrutiny. Her body was commented on, her emotions monitored, and her behavior quietly managed by adults who saw risk where she felt fear. For Demi, fame provided structure, but it also intensified the patterns she had already developed as a child. Control became survival. Food became something to regulate. Silence became safer than honesty. The more praise she received, the more pressure she felt to live up to an image that did not leave room for struggle or imperfection. By her late teens, Demi was living a double life. On stage, she appeared confident, powerful, and composed, a symbol of youthful success. Off stage, she was fighting eating disorders, self-harm, and panic attacks she did not know how to explain without risking everything she had worked for. She learned how to smile through exhaustion, how to perform strength while feeling completely disconnected from herself. The Disney era did not create Demi's pain, but it magnified it. The environment rewarded discipline and silence, not vulnerability or healing. When cracks began to show, they were treated as problems to be managed, not signals of deeper distress. By 2010, the weight became unbearable, and Demi entered rehab for the first time, shocking a public that believed success and happiness always traveled together. But the truth was far more unsettling. Success had not saved her. It had simply given her pain a brighter stage, and a much louder echo. After leaving rehab, Demi Lovato did not retreat from the spotlight, she returned to it. The comeback was immediate and highly visible. New music was released, tours resumed, interviews framed her as resilient, brave, and transformed. To the public, Demi's story became one of redemption, a young star who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. That narrative was powerful. It was also incomplete. Demi learned how to speak about recovery in a way that reassured people. She learned which words sounded hopeful, which confessions felt safe, and which truths were better left unsaid. Her honesty became curated, shaped by expectations and applause. The more she was praised for her strength, the more that strength became something she had to perform. As her career accelerated, so did the pressure. Albums climbed the charts. Her voice matured. Her image evolved into confidence and empowerment. On stage, she commanded arenas. Off stage, she carried the weight of being an example, not just for fans, but for an entire industry eager for a success story that proved recovery worked. Admitting doubt now felt dangerous. Admitting pain felt like regression. Recovery, in theory, is about learning to listen to yourself. But for Demi, recovery slowly turned into discipline. Rules replaced understanding. Control replaced care. Staying well became a responsibility, not a process. When she succeeded, it was celebrated. When she struggled, it felt like a personal failure, not a human one. The illusion of strength began to take shape. Demi appeared fearless, outspoken, and confident, but beneath that surface, the battle never truly stopped. Healing did not move in a straight line. It moved in cycles. Control, then collapse. Discipline, then relapse. Hope, followed by guilt and shame. Each time she stumbled, the pressure to recover quickly intensified, leaving little space to ask why the pain kept returning. Touring became relentless. Long nights. Constant travel. Little rest. The applause never stopped, but neither did the exhaustion. Demi pushed herself harder, believing that movement meant progress, and that slowing down meant weakness. Survival turned into endurance, and endurance quietly turned into burnout. She told the world she was okay. And people believed her, because they needed to. Her strength reassured fans. Her resilience inspired headlines. And Demi learned how to keep going even when she was empty inside. When vulnerability is rewarded only in small doses, silence begins to feel safer than honesty. Over time, that silence grew heavier. The gap between who she was and who she was expected to be widened. The empowerment narrative that once gave her purpose slowly became a prison, because stepping outside of it meant disappointing the people who saw her as proof that healing always leads to triumph. When you are celebrated for being strong long enough, you forget how to ask for help. And when weakness feels forbidden, pain does not disappear. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. Building pressure beneath the surface. By the time the world thought Demi Lovato had everything under control, the illusion of strength was already beginning to crack. The truth is, Demi Lovato was never truly healed, she was managed. As her career continued to rise, recovery slowly became something she had to maintain, not something she was allowed to explore. Sobriety turned into an expectation. Stability turned into a requirement. And strength became a responsibility she could not afford to fail. Behind the scenes, control was everywhere. Schedules were rigid. Routines were enforced. Decisions were filtered through layers of approval designed to minimize risk. What was described as protection gradually began to feel like confinement. Demi's body was monitored. Her diet was regulated. Her freedom was conditional. Trust, once fragile, became transactional. The problem was not that structure existed, it was that understanding did not. Trauma was contained, not processed. Pain was managed, not healed. And when trauma is held down rather than faced, it does not disappear, it intensifies. The same childhood wounds, the same anxiety, the same need for control resurfaced under pressure, only now they carried the weight of global fame. Demi later described feeling stripped of autonomy, as if her life was no longer her own. Without agency, old coping mechanisms returned quietly. At first, they looked harmless. Small acts of defiance. Moments of secrecy. Attempts to reclaim control over her own body and choices. But relief never lasted. The emptiness always came back, heavier than before. Eventually, substances re-entered her life, not as rebellion, but as relief. As the only place where expectations softened and the noise stopped. Addiction did not announce itself loudly. It slipped in quietly, disguised as comfort, as escape, as a temporary sense of peace. Each time, the return felt manageable. Each time, the cost grew higher. What the public saw was a woman smiling on red carpets, speaking confidently about wellness, posting messages of hope and empowerment. What they did not see was the effort it took to maintain that image, the exhaustion of pretending to be okay while quietly unraveling. Mental illness does not disappear because you are famous. Addiction does not weaken because people admire you. And trauma does not respond to applause. As the gap between Demi's public image and private reality widened, isolation deepened. Surrounded by people, she felt profoundly alone. Admitting struggle felt dangerous. Slowing down felt like failure. Asking for help felt like betraying the very story that had been built around her survival. The pressure became unbearable. The rules that once promised safety now fueled resentment. Control, without compassion, began to suffocate. Demi was praised for discipline and criticized for vulnerability, reinforcing the belief that strength meant silence. And silence became the most dangerous place of all. By 2018, the weight of it all had settled into her body. Exhaustion was no longer just physical, it was emotional and psychological. She had tried to be perfect. She had tried to be strong. She had tried to be an example. But beneath the structure, beneath the image, there was a truth she could no longer outrun. This wasn't recovery. It was survival under pressure. And pressure, without healing, can only hold for so long. By the summer of 2018, Demi Lovato was unraveling quietly, dangerously, while the world still believed she was holding everything together. New music was released. Public appearances continued. Smiles appeared where they were expected. From the outside, the narrative still worked. From the inside, the pressure had already become unbearable. The night of July 24th did not arrive with drama or warning. There was no final performance, no public collapse, no moment that felt like an ending. Demi lost consciousness alone, as her body began to shut down. Oxygen levels dropped. Systems failed. By the time she was found, her life depended on minutes. In the hospital, the truth could no longer be softened. Doctors confirmed that Demi had suffered multiple strokes. Her brain had been injured. Her vision was temporarily lost. The damage was severe enough that her family was warned to prepare for uncertainty, not recovery. Survival was not guaranteed, and even if she lived, nothing about her future was promised. When Demi woke up, she woke up to a life she had almost lost. There was no stage, no audience, no image to protect. Only silence, confusion, and the physical weight of what had just happened. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget, and in that hospital room, denial had nowhere to hide. The turning point did not arrive as motivation or clarity. It arrived as truth. The truth that recovery could no longer be performed. The truth that strength could no longer mean silence. And the truth that if she survived this, something fundamental had to change, not just externally, but in the way she understood control, safety, and herself. Healing did not begin immediately. Fear lingered. Shame lingered. Questions lingered. But what had changed was awareness. For the first time, the cost of returning to old patterns was undeniable. This was no longer about reputation, or expectations, or being an example. This was about life or death. The overdose did not fix Demi Lovato. It stripped away illusions. It exposed the limits of control, the danger of silence, and the truth that survival without healing is only a delay. This was not a comeback. It was a reckoning. And from this moment forward, the story could no longer be told the same way. Surviving did not make Demi Lovato fearless, it made her honest. When she left the hospital, she did not return with a victory speech or a polished redemption arc. There was no declaration of triumph, no promise that everything was suddenly fixed. What followed was quieter, slower, and far more uncomfortable, because healing rarely looks the way people expect it to. For the first time, Demi began to question the version of recovery she had been taught to perform. Not as a finish line, not as perfection, but as an ongoing relationship with truth. She spoke openly about relapse without romanticizing it, about therapy without shame, and about the reality that mental illness does not disappear just because you survive its worst moment. In doing so, she disappointed people who wanted a clean success story, and reached others who needed honesty more than inspiration. Her relationship with control began to change. Instead of chasing stability through rigid rules, Demi started learning how to listen to her body and her mind, even when what she heard was messy or contradictory. Healing became less about discipline and more about awareness. Less about image, and more about safety. Her music reflected that shift. The sound became more exposed, the lyrics more direct, less concerned with empowerment as performance and more focused on truth as expression. Songs were no longer designed to prove survival, but to process it. They carried uncertainty, fear, and reflection, the parts of recovery that rarely make it into headlines. Beyond music, Demi's voice began to resonate in a different way. She spoke publicly about the cost of growing up famous before learning how to feel safe, about systems that prioritize control over compassion, and about the long-term impact of trauma left unaddressed. She allowed herself to be complex, to change her mind, to exist without offering a perfect message. This honesty became her legacy. Not chart positions or awards, but permission. Permission for people to struggle without disappearing. Permission to heal without performing strength. Permission to remain human, even when healing is incomplete. Demi Lovato did not return as a symbol of perfection. She returned as someone willing to tell the truth, and in doing so, redefined what survival can look like. Demi Lovato's story is not about falling, it is about what remains after the fall, when the noise fades and the truth is all that's left. She had fame, talent, and the world's attention, and still came terrifyingly close to losing her life. Not because she was weak, but because pain does not disappear when it is hidden behind success. Fame did not protect her. silence did not save her. And strength, when it is performed instead of lived, only delays the reckoning. Demi learned that survival is not a single victory, it is a choice made repeatedly, often quietly, often without applause. She did not defeat her struggles. She learned to listen to them. She learned that healing is not linear, that progress can be slow, and that being alive, present, and honest is already an act of courage. In choosing truth over perfection, she gave herself permission to exist without pretending. Her legacy is not found in awards or chart positions. It lives in honesty. In a world that rewards strength and punishes vulnerability, Demi Lovato chose to speak openly about pain, even when that truth made people uncomfortable. And maybe that is where the real inspiration exists. Not in becoming untouchable, but in choosing to stay human after coming face to face with death, and continuing forward anyway. So the question remains, not shouted, but whispered, what's your story?